Hey guys, it's Derek here with Horizon, and we are right around the corner from getting a chance to get out in the field and actually do some hunting. So I have started to set up my personal hunting rifle for this season. I got really, really lucky, and I hope you did too. I drew a Coos deer hunt in Arizona, as well as a whitetail hunt in Montana on the Milk River that I've wanted to do for a really long time. So I'm setting up my personal 22 Creedmoor rifle here. I've got a Loophole Mark IV scope on it. This one goes up to 24 power. I've removed the throw lever so that I can put on my trigger cam and get some really awesome content. And one thing we started talking about as we were setting up these rifles, we were kind of sitting around the shop here talking about some common issues that we see as people get ready and start setting up their rifles. And so some of this stuff may seem really elementary to a lot of you guys, and some of it may just be a really helpful reminder to be sure and check before you run out on your big hunt. So I'm just going to go through maybe 5 or 6 things here that I see commonly, issues when a rifle comes back here, or somebody has questions about how do I make my rifle even more accurate for using in the field. So I would say, in thinking through this, the number one thing that I see a lot of times is generally the scope selection. And what I mean by that is make sure that you're selecting a scope for the best use of your particular rifle. For me, I know that I need a lot of power. I like to really have a fine-tuned aiming point, and I like using first focal point. We see a lot of times a guy will bring a scope back to us that may be a 3 to 18 power, and we don't realize how thick your crosshairs are. So one thing we like to do, if you're trying to shoot really, really tiny groups, it's very hard to do that if your crosshairs are actually bigger than the group size that you want to shoot. And so if you are shooting super thick crosshairs and you're doing that for a hunting application, just make sure that you're shooting an L-shaped bullseye instead of trying to shoot a dot. It'll make it much more concise in terms of knowing how to adjust that particular rifle, adjust that particular scope to make sure your point of impact is right. But I like to use a fine dot. I like to use first focal point, and I like to use quite a bit of power in my particular scope. Now, after you've selected the scope for your application and you're getting that scope mounted, making sure that scope is level. And personally, I prefer to have some sort of bubble level on that particular optic. So one thing that's really interesting, if you're going out and you're shooting in the field, try this. I think it was really interesting for me to see. And I think until you do it, it's hard to really understand why. But making sure that scope is super level to your receiver and you've got a bubble level that's level to that. Most people don't realize that if I am moving this rifle about 6 degrees, which is about a half a bubble off, at 500 yards, it's going to move my point of impact about 4.5 inches. So when you're setting up to shoot, not being level, and especially when you're in a hunting situation, it's really difficult to tell what is level. Not having that level set up correctly can cause you to miss, usually high and away, and it can be really, really, really frustrating. So just making sure that you know that optics, that you have some way to reference what is level before you pull the trigger. Next thing on that, kind of on the same plane, is checking the tracking of your scope. So one thing I like to do on my particular rifle is I go out, I zero it at 100 yards, and I've got a really big target at my house where I shoot, and I have a very plumb bob, basically. So a string with a heavy weight on the end of it where I have drawn a straight up and down vertical line. And so once I've shot a group at 100 yards, what I will do is I will dial my turret to what should be 500 yards, and then I will shoot at 100 yards at that same point of impact. And so basically all I'm doing is I'm moving that group up that string to make sure that the scope is still tracking correctly, right? I don't want the scope to be mounted crooked. And so as I go up, now I'm changing my point of aim on the animal. So it's just really double checking that scope is tracking true, and not even just the scope tracking true, but make sure you've really got it mounted, correctly in terms of in the up and down position, to make sure that when you make that dial, you're not going to miss because your setup was bad. So we see that quite a lot. The other thing, this is sort of an obvious point, is making sure your trigger weight is nice, crisp, and light. A lot of times I see guys who grew up like myself, had really, really heavy triggers. If you drop that trigger weight down a few ounces to what you're used to, and you can get a little more surprise and you can get a really crisp feel. obviously your groups will become significantly better. You'll stop anticipating that breakover a lot. And so just making sure that your trigger is nice and crisp. Other thing I see a lot is people just flat get their dope wrong. And what I mean by dope is you're basically your drop chart, your drop data on the particular rifle. If you're trying to do long range shooting, the box speeds on the back is great. It's a good starting point, but you cannot beat having an actual chronograph and knowing your speeds. And if you can't afford a chronograph or don't have a chronograph, using those box speeds, but then using a calculator like Fordoff or even Kestrel to back into what the actual speeds of your rifle is, and they have proven and tested that, and not just assuming that the data on the box is what your particular rifle will shoot. And I see that happen a lot when guys move in elevation. They'll set the gun up for one elevation, go to a different elevation, use a CDS style turret and expect the same results. And it just doesn't quite work like that. I really like and recommend JBM Ballistics. It's a free website. You can run a lot of data on your particular rifle and just change the environmental factors and see what that does to your rifle. I think it's really, really helpful to learn some of that information as you go out in the field. Other thing I see a lot of people do is we do not think about how the wind is going to push your particular projectile, right? And so that may be really, really obvious, but think about the wind, and I keep a log as to what the wind was doing on the day I sighted the rifle in, because, if you sight the gun in with a 10-mile-an-hour crosswind and then expect that to be your zero, and then you go out and shoot long range and it's not a 10-mile-an-hour crosswind, there's going to be differences in your zero. So it's really all about getting a really, really good, concise zero. Even with the 22 Creedmoor 18-inch barrel with the 80 grain projectiles, a gusty 10-mile-an-hour wind from your right to left, so 90 degrees, can cause over a half minute of movement in the 22 Creedmoor. So just think about that as you're sighting your gun in. What is the wind doing while I'm getting my real true zero? And the last thing I want to mention that I see happen a lot when I go to the ranges is how people tend to grip the rifle. So one thing I learned a lot doing competitive archery is just being able to push through the target and making sure that everything's running, straight back and forth, and you're not getting torque put into your shooting platform. So just like an archery grip, on a rifle, I see a lot of guys want to wrap their hand around and grip it like a pistol. It's not a pistol. That's why we have the thumb detents on the IOTA stocks, that you can make sure that your thumb is in that detent and you're not wrapping your particular rifle. It's another fun experiment. Get on a shooting range, get your gun right, shoot, and then wrap your thumb over and watch your bubble level move and shoot again, and you'll see points of impact change with your particular shooting platform just based on your shooting form. So anyway, guys, those are some of the common things that we see a lot of times that people overthink or don't think about at all as you're starting to get your hunting rifle set up. We want you to have the best hunting experience this fall, and we look forward to seeing all your trophy photos and all the videos and comments about you guys using your Horizon rifles in the field. We appreciate it as always. Be sure and like and subscribe, and we'll catch you later.